All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a quick review of how to find a greatest common factor and a lowest common multiple of algebraic expressions like these. Now this is a review, so we're just going to do the how-to right here. And if you don't understand some of the reasons why we do this, then you need to go back and do a little bit more studying, because you're going to forget the how-to if you don't understand the why. Anyway, very quickly, greatest common factor means what is the biggest thing that's a part of both of these? And so that's kind of a tricky thing. This is a part, right? So we're talking about what's the biggest thing that's a part of both of those. Now, when I look at 12, and I look at 40, well, what jumps out to me is that they both have a factor of 4. You see, that's 4 times 3, and this is 4 times 10. They both have a factor of 4. Now, there's nothing in common, multiplication-wise, between 3 and 10. 3 and 10 are what are called coprime. They're relatively prime. They don't have anything in common. So as far as GCF, they both have a factor of 4. Excuse me. Now, a squared and a. Now, this is a times a, and that's just a. The biggest thing they have in common, do you see a squared is a times a, and that's a. The biggest thing they have in common is a. So my GCF of both of those is going to be 4, now a. Now let's take a look at the b's. We have b, we have b squared. Now b squared is, well, that's 2 b's, right? And this is just 1 b. So the biggest thing they have in common is b. That is the greatest common factor. Now where that would come into play is if you had, I don't know, something like 12a squared b, and you were dividing it by 40a b squared. What you would actually divide out of the numerator and the denominator would be this greatest common factor. So 4 goes into 12, 3 times, a goes into a squared, a times, and b goes into b 1 time. And you do the denominator the same way. You see 40 divided by 4 is 10, a goes into a 1 time, and b goes into b 1 time. So if you were reducing, you would use the greatest common factor. That's what it's for. Now, lowest common multiple. People mix this up all the time because of the L. The L stands for lowest, but now, instead of looking for a part that exists in these two, it's a little different. These two things right here are a part of something else. Yeah, they are a part of something else. So these are both, like the thing we're looking for is going to be a multiple of both of these. And we're looking for the smallest multiple they both share. Wow, 12 and 40 is kind of ugly. I mean, I'm just like thinking in my head, like if I take the bigger number 40, 12 doesn't go into 40, so it can't have anything to do with 40. The next multiple of 40 is 80. It doesn't go in there. But the next one's 120, and 12 does go into 120. So I think the smallest thing that both 12 and 40 goes into is going to be 120. So I'm going to go ahead and write 120. Now, I figured that out just by making a list of the larger number, and that's a pretty easy way to do it. Now, this is where you get confused. What is the smallest thing that both a squared and a go into? Now, we're not asking what's the biggest thing that goes into them. No, we're asking, we have a different number. We have some other random number. And what's the smallest number that a and a squared goes into? Well, that has to be a squared. You see, a squared is bigger than a. So a squared doesn't go into a, not without a remainder. So the biggest thing they both go into is a squared. You can make this into a squared. You can't make this into a. Well, you can, but not for the purposes of what we're doing right here. And we have the same argument for the b and the b squared. We're looking for what's the smallest thing that b squared divides into and b also divides into, and that would be b squared. Now, where this comes into play is you might be adding something like these two things together. And in order to add fractions together, you have to find the lowest common denominator, which is the same thing as the lowest common multiple. And that would be it right there. It would be 120 a squared b squared. So in order to make this into that, and I know I'm going a little beyond what the initial intent of this video was, but this is where it's leading up to. So, these little skills in isolation aren't much use if you don't know where they tie in. So we're going to go ahead and do this. Like, to make 12 into 120, you have to multiply by 10, right? It's already got the a squared, so we're golden there, but b needs to be b squared. Well, b squared is b times b, so I just need to multiply by 10b. Do you see? And I get 10b They're adding, so there we go. Now 40 becomes 120 if I multiply it by 3. So I'm going to multiply by 3 over 3, and that gives me a 3 here. But now the a is not a squared. I need to make that an a squared, so I'm going to multiply by a. I get 3a, and there's your answer. That would be it. Now, let me show you one more way to get the LCM of these two numbers right here, because sometimes that's a little tricky, like making a list of the bigger number and seeing if it goes in. And this other method right here, just looking at the 12 and the 40, this other method using factors also helps us find the greatest common factor first. So 12, 2 times 2 times 3, right? 4 times 3 is 12. And 40 is 2 times 2, that's 4, right? Times 10, 10 is 2 times 5, do you see? Or 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 5 is also 40. So those are the lists of all the factors of each number. And that's what you can start with. Do you see what they share in common? Do you see they both have a 4? I'm going to go ahead and mark them off my list. There's a 4 here. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4, right? That right there is my greatest common factor. Now, the rest of these numbers right here, I need to go ahead and add them to my list. I'm going to go ahead and multiply those as 10. That right there, 12 times 10, is 120. That's my LCM. Do you see? I circled the greatest common factor. It's right here. And when I multiply the greatest common factor with the leftovers, I get my LCM. Now another trick right here. Lowest common multiples for denominators when you're adding, and if we had these two things as denominators, right? The way I'd make 40 into 120 is by multiplying by the leftovers of the 12. Now, that's pretty easy, but if this was an ugly number, that's a good shortcut. And the way I make 12 into 120 is I multiply by the leftovers of the 40, which was 10. 10 times 12 is 120. So anyway, hope that was helpful. If it was, you could let me know. Leave me a comment or click like and subscribe. And until next time, I really do hope that you have a good day and best of luck.